If you have ever been surprised by someone betraying you, you misread the game. Because trust does not collapse randomly. It collapses when the incentive structure shifts. Not because people suddenly become immoral, not because loyalty evaporates overnight, but because the conditions that made cooperation rational quietly disappear. Most people think betrayal is emotional. They think trust collapses because someone is greedy, insecure, weak, or manipulative. But that explanation is comforting and wrong. Trust usually breaks because incentives change, and when incentives change, even intelligent people defect. That is uncomfortable, because it means betrayal is often predictable, and if it was predictable, then it was avoidable. And if it was avoidable, then you were not reading the structure correctly. This is not about becoming cynical, it is about becoming structurally aware. Imagine two rational individuals. They can cooperate and both benefit, or one can defect while the other cooperates and gain more. If both defect, both lose. Now here is the critical tension. If you cannot be certain what the other person will do, the safest individual move is to defect, even if cooperation would have produced a better outcome for both of you. This dynamic is known as the prisoner's dilemma, not as a classroom thought experiment, but as a recurring reality. Two people can both prefer mutual cooperation and still rationally choose betrayal, not because they lack values, but because they lack guarantees. Trust is not fundamentally about morality. It is about predictability. When behavior is predictable, cooperation stabilizes. When behavior becomes uncertain, defection spreads, and uncertainty rises when incentives diverge. In a single interaction, a one-off deal, a short-term exchange, a temporary alliance, defection is often rational. There is no future cost, no reputational compounding, no repeated exposure. In repeated interactions, where future consequences exist, cooperation becomes rational, because betrayal today damages tomorrow. The future is leverage. When the future is visible and meaningful, restraint exists. When the future disappears, so does restraint. This explains why trust collapses most violently under pressure. Pressure changes payoffs. Pressure changes risk. Pressure changes time horizon. When budgets tighten, when promotions narrow, when social status shifts, when scrutiny increases, the game changes. And when the game changes, behavior follows. You do not need to assume malice. You need to examine incentives. Consider the workplace. In stable conditions, colleagues cooperate, information flows, credit is shared, alliances are broad. Why? Because upside is mutual. The organization grows, everyone benefits, and reputational capital compounds. Now introduce scarcity, fewer promotions, political instability, resource constraints, executive turnover, suddenly alignment fractures, information becomes selective, visibility becomes guarded, people withhold optionality. Not because they woke up unethical, but because the cost of vulnerability increased and the reward for self-protection rose. The structure shifted. Most people misdiagnose this moment. They feel betrayed. They personalize it. But structurally, the game moved from repeated cooperative to competitive positional. If you continue playing a cooperative strategy inside a competitive game, you become predictable, and predictable players are exploited. That does not mean you defect immediately. It means you reassess, because strategy must match structure. Now step outside corporate life. Think about friendships. Friendships are stable when repetition is high. Shared environments, shared history, shared social circles, shared memory. Repetition builds trust because behavior is continuously observed and consequences are ongoing. Now introduce distance. Different cities, different industries, different income brackets, different social status. Repetition weakens. Visibility declines. Future interaction becomes uncertain. The cost of subtle defection drops. Gradually, without drama, loyalty decays. Not always from hostility, from structural drift. Distance destroys trust faster than conflict. Conflict keeps players in the same game. It keeps interaction active. It maintains repetition. Distance dissolves the game entirely. When the game dissolves, incentives revert to self-interest. In repeated games, cooperation only survives if defection carries consequence. If someone defects and nothing happens, defection spreads. If someone betrays you and you absorb it silently, you signal that betrayal is affordable. If you overreact dramatically to minor violations, you signal volatility. Volatility makes others defect preemptively, because unpredictable retaliation increases risk. The stable strategy is controlled retaliation, measured, predictable, proportionate, not emotional, strategic. This creates reputation. Reputation is not about being liked, it is about being legible. Others need to know, if I cooperate, stability continues. If I defect, there will be proportionate cost. Clarity stabilizes the system. Ambiguity destabilizes it. Now consider romantic relationships. Early stages often feel intense and stable, but early stability is frequently driven by optimism and novelty, not structural alignment. If long-term incentives are not aligned, values, lifestyle direction, ambition level, financial philosophy, the repeated game becomes fragile. Eventually, one person's incentive structure shifts, and when it shifts enough, defection becomes rational from their perspective. Again, not necessarily immoral, structurally coherent. If your partner's time horizon changes and yours does not, the game splits. If one person optimizes for long-term stability and the other optimizes for short-term gratification, the equilibrium becomes unstable. An unstable equilibria collapse. This is why clarity about incentives early is more important than chemistry. Chemistry creates emotion. Incentive alignment creates durability. Now consider negotiation. In a one-off negotiation, each side has incentive to extract maximum value. In a repeated negotiation, where future deals matter, both sides moderate. Long-term players sacrifice short-term gain for reputational capital. Short-term players maximize extraction. The danger is misidentifying which game you are in. If you assume repetition where none exists, you will cooperate too generously. If you assume a one-off when repetition exists, you will defect too aggressively and damage future leverage. Strategic awareness means identifying the game correctly, not judging character. Reading structure. Most people interpret loyalty as a personality trait. He is loyal, she is trustworthy. But loyalty is contextual. Change the environment and behavior often changes with it. That is not cynicism. It is systems thinking. And here is where this becomes powerful. If trust is structural, you can design for it. You can increase repetition, you can increase visibility, you can increase consequence, you can align incentives. In teams, this means shared upside structures, transparent metrics, long-term incentives rather than purely short-term rewards. Clear consequences for defection. In relationships, it means aligned life direction, mutual investment, shared future planning. In business, it means contracts combined with reputational incentives. In leadership, it means consistent responses to behavior. You do not demand trust. You engineer conditions where cooperation is rational. Now we address neutrality. There are moments when commitment increases vulnerability. In unstable games, rigid commitment can be exploited. If alliances are fluid and incentives unclear, overcommitment removes optionality. Optionality is leverage. This does not mean permanent detachment. It means measured commitment relative to structural stability. When stability is high, commitment strengthens cooperation. When stability is low, flexibility preserves survival. The mistake most people make is assuming trust is binary. Trusted or not trusted. In reality, trust is dynamic. It fluctuates with time horizon, repetition, visibility, consequence, and incentive alignment. Change one variable and behavior shifts. Strategic individuals monitor these variables continuously. They ask, is this interaction repeated or isolated? Are incentives aligned or drifting? Is defection currently rewarded or punished? Is the future meaningful enough to restrain short-term opportunism? These questions eliminate surprise. They do not eliminate risk, but they eliminate naivety. If you have ever been shocked by betrayal, it was not random. Something in the structure changed. Either repetition decreased, or consequences weakened, or incentives diverged, or time horizon shortened. The move is not anger. The move is analysis. Because once you see trust as structural, you stop moralizing behavior prematurely. You begin mapping incentives instead. And when you map incentives, you regain leverage. You stop being reactive. You start being anticipatory. You do not assume loyalty where structure does not support it. You do not assume betrayal where alignment is strong. You design environments where cooperation is rational. And when you cannot design those environments, you limit exposure calmly, without drama, without accusation, without emotional escalation. Trust does not break because humans are flawed. Trust breaks because games change, and games are always changing. The difference between being repeatedly blindsided and being strategically stable is not intelligence. It is structural awareness. Understand the game, map the incentives, monitor the repetition, control the consequences. And you will find that betrayal becomes less surprising and cooperation becomes more durable. That is the difference between reacting to power and understanding it.